Hello, good evening to you and a warm welcome to the midweek edition of Business Live. Coming up in this bulletin, inflation for February 2025 reduces marginally to 23.1%. We'll hear from the government statistician.
Given the two indices of 255.9 relative to 207.8, year-on-year inflation for the month of February 2025 stood at 23.1%.
Also in this bulletin, management of Bank of Ghana to conduct value for money audit into the new Bank of Ghana headquarters at Ridge as the cost of the building increases to from 81 million cedis to $261 million.
To seek authorization from the board to engage AESL for a value for money audit into the new building.
We will be interrogating the figures much further with a financial economist pretty soon. Plus, thanks so much. You could stay on. I am Pius Kojobakai looking at our stories. Inflation for the month of February 2025 has reduced marginally to 23.1% from the 23.5% recorded in January this year. Well, this was influenced by a reduction in food inflation by 1.8%. Addressing journalists, government statistician Professor Samokobnenim said constant decline in food inflation impacted on the overall figure.
In the month of February 2025, Consumer Price Index stood at 255.9 relative to 207.8 that was recorded for the same time period in February 2024. Given the two indices of 255.9 relative to 207.8, year-on-year inflation for the month of February 2025 stood at 23.1%. Year-on-year inflation for the month of February 2025 stood at 23.1%. This signifies a 0.4 percentage point drop relative to the rate that was recorded in January 2025. In January 2025, year-on-year inflation stood at 23.5%, and this has marginally dropped by 0.4 percentage point to 23.1% for the month of February 2025. This means that general prices of goods and services between February 2024 and February 2025 has gone up by 23.1%. General price levels of goods and services between the month of February 2024 and February 2025 went up by 23.1%. On a month-on-month basis, with an index of 255.9 for February 2025 relative to 252.6 for January 2025, month-on-month inflation for the month of February 2025 stood at 1.3%. This means that between January and February 2025, general price levels of goods and services went up by 1.3%. with locally produced items 25.1% relative to imported items 18.5%. We look at food and non-food inflation on a year-on-year basis and also on a month-on-month basis. On a year-on-year basis, we've seen a dip in food inflation from 28.3% to 28.1%. This figure is still higher than the rates that have been recorded since June 2024, with an inflation rate of 24% through to 27.8%. So despite the drop of 0.2 percentage point between January and February 2025, this rate of 28.1% is still high relative to rates that have been recorded since April 2024. For the fourth consecutive time, we've seen a dip in year-on-year non-food inflation, dipping from 21.5% through to 18.8% that has been recorded for February 2025.
Now, Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Johnson Isiama, has announced plans to request a value for money audit of the new Bank of Ghana headquarters building at Ridge here in Accra. Briefing Parliament on the cost of the project, Dr. Isiama disclosed that steps have been taken to get the firm AESL company to conduct the audit after seeking board approval. He disclosed that the building so far cost $230 million.
In 2019, under a new board of the Bank of Ghana, a structural integrity audit was conducted, and this showed that the existing head office, which was built in the late 1950s, had developed significant structural defects and was no longer fit for purpose. Mr. Speaker, the project was initially valued by the PPA at $81.8 million US, but later increased to $121.1 million after the Bank of Ghana requested for re-evaluation. This was revised again to $222.8 million, and I'm just rounding off, Mr. Speaker, after the redesign and inclusion of building management systems. Mr. Speaker, there were also statutory requirements, security needs, and sustainability considerations. As a result, the total project cost increased to $261.8 million. Mr. Speaker, as of February this year, a total of $230 million approximately has been paid towards the project, with an outstanding balance of $31.8 million to be paid to the contractor. Mr. Speaker, a total of $48.3 million has been paid in taxes and levies that were related to the construction. Mr. Speaker, beyond the core building, separate contracts were awarded for other infrastructure.
Let's bring in the thoughts of financial economist Professor Lord Mercer. He joins us via Zoom. Thanks so much, Prof, for agreeing to speak to us on Business Live. Once again, the conversation about the cost of the building of the new Bank of Ghana headquarters has reignited. Now, this time round, it's about the cost. Earlier, under Governor Addison, we learned it will cost us $81 million, but after various variations, the cost currently stands at $261.8 million. Are you surprised as well?
Yes, I'm very much, surprised. I mean, an entity, like Bank of Ghana, going into a project and we have, the cost involved shifting in numbers. I look at the variation. We're looking at $81, million all the way up to $230 million. Quite a huge, variation. And you ask yourself what considerations was taken in place to. We cannot talk about inflation when it comes to a quotation. The reason why most of the time the agendatic is quoted as a result. So if you are talking about the US inflation, it's not up to the variation that we see. Add-ons, I had the indicators or maybe gadgets that will be added to the facility to make it, sustainable friendly or to make it kind of green friendly. To warrant this amount is quite huge. And even if it will cost us, $230 million, the initial estimation that brought about, calls for so many questions. And I think we need to ask questions about the numbers.
We need to ask more questions, you say. Well, some have also lashed out at the Bank of Ghana for even paying in dollars and not cedis. That's a fair concern, I guess.
Well, for such projects, most of the, inputs definitely will be more or less, imported. And if you have about 80% of the inputs to the project being imported, you have no choice than to quote them in dollars. If you put them in cedis, obviously, the price quotation and the depreciation. Maybe the project concept was hatched somewhere, when the exchange rate was around, 4 Ghana cedis per the dollar. But then as time goes on, look at the leap in Ghana cedi against dollar. So obviously, it will be to quote it in cedis, just to be stable in terms of, prices on the market. But, looking at a project that was estimated to cost somewhere around 81 million and jumping to 230 million. It calls for questions, and we may have to ask questions on the add-on that will call for such jump.
Well, so far, we know $230 million have been paid to the contractor and a remainder of about $31.8 million to be settled. But the governor has disclosed that steps have been taken to get the firm EASL company to conduct a value for money audit after seeking board approval. I'm wondering what your expectations are and what you're looking forward to.
Well, when you look at project management and the payment to contractors, normally they are in phases. And I don't know the percentage of completion of the project to call for, more than, I think, 90% of the payment as we see from the numbers. So if it turns out that, the current state of the project is about 90% complete and then 90% of the payment has been done, that is okay. But if we have a structure which, let's be honest, when you look at, a big structure like that, don't look at just, the block work that is making up the structure. Usually the fittings even more than the block. So if the fittings has not come in, furnitures and then all those, security systems that needs to be put in place to befit, a central bank, building are not in place, and we've incurred, 230 million already, which it's left with about 31 million to be paid. Then it calls to question, because if you look at project, settlement, you look at it in phases, and the phase that will be completed should determine the amount of, the part of the cost that needs to be relayed to the contractor.
Let's shift focus from the Bank of Ghana to inflation matters, because we understand the month of February, inflation reduced marginally to 23.1% from the 23.5% recorded in January this year. Impressive. How do we sustain this trajectory?
Yeah, very, very impressive. Let's look at, wait for the budget that will be read by the current administration and see how they will factor in these inflation numbers. I always say that, sometimes there's kind of dissociation between, the numbers that Statistical Service churns out, which is supposed to influence policies, and then we end up reading budgets that more or less the budget does its own thing. I heard from the Statistical Service boss that, the food inflation consistently, staying stable has brought these inflation numbers down. And I always, hammer on this. If you have a country where you import most of your essentials like food, then you have no control over your economy. Your economy has been shifted to someone out there. So now that these numbers are out, and clearly, there's an indication that if we control food inflation, we should see our inflation numbers, coming down. It goes a long way. Another thing that I think is fueling the non-food inflation part of it is the exchange rate, relative stability that we've enjoyed, over the past few months. Clearly, we know the pass-through effect of, exchange rate on prices on our market. Once the dollar starts, shaking itself, price also react as such. So I think it's a good signal, and we should use the budget and this, numbers that are coming out from the Statistical Service to do our allocations when it comes to expenditure lines.
As we wrap up the conversation, ultimately, when you take a look at the 6 main key pillars that the governor outlined earlier, to what extent can they contribute in controlling the rate of inflation, at least in achieving the single-digit target for the projected period, 2026 first quarter, I'm told?
Yeah, remind me of the 6 pillars that you're talking about. I think I lost track of the governor's participation on the dialogue that went on, yesterday.
No, not really about the dialogue, but when he met President Mahama, after he was sworn in, he outlined some pillars he would be working with, ensuring that we have...
Oh, yeah, there's one fascinating thing that I enjoyed from him, which I think if he keeps to it, is going to help. Working hand in hand with the fiscal side of the economy. The finance minister, spends. And at the end of the day, if you have a finance minister who is controlling the fiscal policy side of the economy, sitting in isolation. And central bank is on the market using monetary policy to chase, inflation rate. Then obviously we're going to have problems because in previous regime, what we saw was that whilst the governor and his team were on the market using monetary policy rate to chase, inflation, the finance minister was doing his own thing. And so there was a complete dissociation, forcing price on the market to go up, whilst one policy is also, trying to chase the price to come down. There was a stalemate.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Lord Mensah, for your thoughts this very moment. I truly appreciate it. He's a senior finance lecturer and, of course, also a financial economist.